My husband divorced me at 40, calling me a burden. He thought it was my expiration date. He handed me the papers in the house I paid for, not knowing I was about to be the richest, freest burden he'd ever met. He saw a liability. My great-uncle saw a legacy. The difference. $3.2 million and a smile he would never understand. My name is Eliza. I am 40 years old, by trade. I am a forensic accountant at Veritas Risk Solutions. I trace numbers. I find the quiet lies hidden in spreadsheets. I am meticulous. I am logical. And I am the financial pillar holding up my entire life. Or at least, I was. My husband, Marcus, is 42. He is not a numbers man. He is a thinker. That is the word his family uses. He is charismatic, handsome in that effortless way that makes people want to hand him money, and he is a serial entrepreneur. His latest venture is Atmosphere Solutions, some vague clean tech concept built on buzzwords and, as far as I could tell, zero actual science. I had just spent 3 hours finishing a private report. It was for my eyes only. A detailed tracing of the $50,000 my money from my bonus that Marcus had lost in his previous venture. It was not lost. It was funneled, diverted into seeding this new atmosphere idea without my knowledge. I closed the laptop, the anger a cold, familiar knot in my stomach. To counter it, I was cooking coq au vin, a complex multi-hour dish, an attempt to reconnect, as our therapist, paid by my insurance, had suggested. The rich smell of the wine and herbs filled our expensive Denver loft, the loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a mortgage payment my 6-figure salary covered almost entirely. The door opened. Marcus. He did not call out a greeting. He just walked in, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. He was not carrying apologies. He was carrying a sleek, new leather briefcase I did not recognize. He walked right past the kitchen, ignoring the simmering pots, ignoring me. He went to the center of the living room, the city lights framing him like a stage. "Marcus, dinner is almost ready," I said, my voice sounding weaker than I wanted. He turned. He was not looking at me. He was looking through me. "Eliza," he said, his voice calm, practiced. "I cannot do this anymore." I wiped my hands on my apron. "Cannot do what Marcus. I know about the 50,000. We can talk about it." He almost smiled. It was pitying. "This. Us. I cannot." He placed the briefcase on our glass coffee table and clicked it open. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You are a burden. You do not see the vision. You never have. You are anchoring me to this mediocrity." Mediocrity. The word hit me like a physical slap. This mediocrity. The comfortable life, the vacations he planned, the expensive sporting equipment gathering dust in the closet, the very roof over his head, all of it was mediocrity funded by my burden, my salary. He slid the papers across the glass. Divorce. His signature, a confident, arrogant swirl, was already at the bottom of the petition. "I want a clean break," he announced, as if presenting a new business plan. "A quick division, 50-50. I want to be free." I looked at him. He was bracing for the explosion. He expected tears, screaming, begging. He expected the mess. I gave him nothing. My mind, the accountant's mind, just locked onto the signature. I saw the date. I saw the demand for 50%. My brain was not processing the emotional trauma. It was already calculating. It was auditing the end of my marriage. He seemed disappointed by my silence. "Well," he pushed. I just stared at the ink. "I am leaving tonight," he said, his voice hardening. And that is when I saw it. By the door, next to the ceramic bowl, was a packed duffel bag, not the new briefcase, an old gym bag, stuffed full. He had not just been thinking about this. He had planned this. This entire day was an execution. He did not wait for another word. He grabbed the bag, walked out, and closed the door quietly behind him. I was left alone. Just me, the divorce papers on the table, and a pot of coq au vin, perfectly cooked for two, already going cold. I did not move for an hour, maybe two. The coq au vin congealed in its pot. Finally, I picked up my phone. My fingers felt thick, disconnected from my brain. I dialed Chloe. She picked up on the third ring, her voice sharp. Awake. What is broken? He left me, I whispered. The words sounded foreign, ridiculous. A beat of silence. Not sympathy. Analysis. Marcus. He called me a burden. He had a bag packed. I heard her exhale. A short, percussive sound. Good, Chloe said, her voice devoid of comfort and full of steel. The parasite detached itself. Now we sterilize. Did he take the good towels? I laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. I did not check. Check. Then lock the doors and call a lawyer. I will be over after my shift with sutures and bourbon. She hung up. Chloe was not a thinker. She was a doer. The next morning, I went to work at Veritas Risk Solutions. I put on my gray suit. I put on my neutral face. I operated as a machine. I opened spreadsheets. The numbers swam, then focused. Numbers are clean. Numbers do not lie. Not unless you force them to. I traced a fraudulent insurance claim from a shipping company in Miami. It was simple. It was logical. My boss, Mr. Thorne, a man of few words and thick glasses, stopped by my desk at 4 p.m. He stared at my screen, then at my face. Your margins are off by 0.2%. Vance, he said. I looked. He was right. A simple transposition error, one I had not made in 5 years. I will fix it. He nodded, his gaze lingering. He saw the distraction. He saw the crack in the facade. But Thorne was old school. He did not ask. He just expected it to be fixed. See that you do, he said, and walked away. I fixed the error. I billed my hours. I left at 5:01. Returning to the loft was the hardest part. The silence was violent. It was not just quiet. It was an absence. A void where Marcus's voice, his big idea pitches, his loud phone calls, used to be. I walked through the rooms. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors he had insisted on. I saw his dreams everywhere. The carbon fiber racing bike, worth $10,000, hanging on the wall. He had used it twice. The stack of unread business biographies on his nightstand, bookmarked with sales receipts. The meditation corner he had set up, complete with imported cushions, that he never once sat in. This was the mediocrity I had anchored him to, a museum of his expensive, abandoned impulses. I sat on the sofa. I did not turn on the lights. The city lights of Denver were bright enough. I should have been crying. I should have been screaming. Instead, I just felt empty, audited. My phone rang. It vibrated on the glass table, the sound like an alarm. I did not recognize the number. The area code was 307, Wyoming. I answered. Hello. Am I speaking with Ms. Eliza Vance? A man's voice asked. It was dry, formal. This is she. Ms. Vance, my name is Mr. Harding, with Harding and Associates in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Are you the niece of Mr. Arthur Pendleton? The name hit me from a great distance. Arthur Pendleton, my great-uncle, my mother's uncle. The black sheep, a recluse, a ghost. I had met him maybe 3 times, all before I was 10. He was a tall, silent man who smelled of dust and old paper. Yes, I said slowly. I am. Is something wrong? I am afraid I have unfortunate news. Ms. Vance, your uncle passed away 2 days ago. I felt a strange, hollow percussion in my chest. Not grief, just impact. 2 days ago. The day before Marcus left me. Oh, I said. I did not know. We are aware, Mr. Harding said, his tone unchanging. Mr. Pendleton was a very private man. I am calling because we are probating his will. You are named as the sole and primary beneficiary. My brain, the accountant's brain, stalled. beneficiary of what a dusty cabin, Ms. Vance. Mr. Harding continued, cutting through my confusion. I must request your presence in Cheyenne as soon as possible. Tomorrow, if you can manage it. Tomorrow, Mr. Harding. My life is very complicated right now. What is this about? There was a pause. The lawyer seemed to be choosing his words. Ms. Vance, your uncle was particular. There are assets that need to be secured immediately. Significant assets. I took the day off from Veritas, citing a family emergency. It was not a lie. I drove the 100 miles north to Cheyenne, my knuckles white on the steering wheel of my practical sedan. The sky was a vast, empty blue. My mind was just as empty and just as vast. It was reeling, trying to process two massive opposing forces, a life ending and an inheritance beginning. Significant assets. The words echoed. My accountant brain tried to quantify it. What did significant mean to a recluse in Wyoming? $10,000 50 Mr. Harding's office was not significant. It was in a small, 2-story brick building downtown, above a shop that sold saddles. The stairs creaked. The office smelled of old coffee and floor wax. Harding himself matched the office worn, neat, and from another era. He wore a bow tie and suspenders. Ms. Vance, thank you for coming so promptly, he said, gesturing to a hard wooden chair. He explained the situation with meticulous, dry detail. My great-uncle Arthur was, as Harding put it, deeply skeptical of modern financial systems. He was a paranoid genius. He did not trust banks. He did not trust the government. He barely trusted Mr. Harding. He structured his life to be invisible. Harding explained, opening a thick, leather-bound folder. And he was very successful at it. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. The last will and testament of Arthur Pendleton. It was handwritten, notarized, and utterly bizarre. It left his cat, Persephone, to his neighbor, and everything else. All worldly goods, liquid, solid, and esoteric, went to me, Eliza Vance. We are still cataloging Ms. Vance, Harding said, putting on a pair of reading glasses. The estate is complex, but our current conservative valuation is approximately $3.2 million. The number did not compute. It was an integer from a different reality. I am sorry. Did you say 3.2 million? That is correct, and that is a lowball estimate. Your uncle did not hold his wealth in a checking account. Harding detailed the assets. Physical gold bullion, certified, stored in multiple private vaults across 3 states, a collection of rare stamps, including an inverted Jenny. That alone was worth over $1 million. And a stock portfolio, managed under an assumed name through a Swiss firm. That was baffling in its prescience. Arthur had shorted the 2008 housing market. He had bought into tech in the late 90s and sold in 2000. He was not just a recluse, he was a phantom savant. I just sat there. The shock of the divorce had been a cold void. This was a different shock. It was a weight. Harding leaned forward, his expression softening for the first time. A warning. Ms. Vance, your uncle included this in his notes for me to pass on to you. He said, new money attracts old predators. Be careful. Very careful. Old predators. The words snapped everything into focus. Marcus. My accountant brain, the one that had been numb for 2 days, rebooted. It came online with terrifying clarity. I saw the timeline. Arthur died. Marcus filed for divorce. Mr. Harding called me. In that order, Marcus had filed before I was an heiress. He had filed when I was just Eliza Vance. The burden, the anchor. He had no idea. The timing, it was not a coincidence. It was not a tragedy. It was a legal miracle. Under Colorado law, an inheritance received after the filing for dissolution of marriage is not marital property. It is separate property. It was all mine. My entire demeanor shifted. The fog cleared. I was not a victim. I was a fortress. I looked at Mr. Harding. Mr. Harding, do you have a phone? I can use a landline and a phone book. He looked confused, but pointed to the phone on his credenza. I did not call Chloe. I did not call my mother. I looked up the number for a private bank, one Marcus had never heard of, one that did not even have a retail branch in Denver. I spent the next 40 minutes on the phone, in that dusty office, my voice cold, precise, and professional. I opened a new private wealth account. I opened a new checking account. I opened a new trust account. I began the process of creating a firewall between my old life and my new one. When I hung up, Mr. Harding was looking at me with a newfound respect. You learn quickly, Ms. Vance. I am a forensic accountant, I said. It is my job to protect assets. He nodded, satisfied. There is one last item. He retrieved a small manila envelope from his safe. This was not part of the estate. This was a personal effect he left in my care, specifically for you. He tipped the envelope, and a small, tarnished silver locket fell into his palm. It was old, Victorian. I took it. It was heavy. I opened it. There was no picture of a long-lost love, no lock of hair. Inside, nestled in the faded velvet, was a tiny, intricately made key. It was not a jewelry key. It looked like a key for a mechanism, or a very small, very old lock. What is this? I asked. Harding shook his head. I do not know. His instructions were specific. He said, she will know what it is for. Do you? Ms. Vance. I looked at the strange, delicate key. No, I said. I have no idea at all. I returned to Denver in a daze. The drive back was a blur. $3.2 million. The number was a shield. It was a weapon. It was a secret that buzzed under my skin. I walked into the loft, and the silence that had felt like a void now felt like a vault. My vault. I was staring at the divorce papers, still on the coffee table, when the building buzzer rang. I was not expecting anyone. Chloe was still at the hospital. I looked at the intercom camera. Beatrice. My stomach tightened. Beatrice, Marcus's older sister, a woman who lived in a fortress of privilege in Cherry Creek, whose entire personality was curated around what people will think and the passive-aggressive enforcement of social norms. I buzzed her up. I had no choice. Not answering would be a statement, and Beatrice lived for analyzing statements. The elevator doors opened, and she swept into my hallway, perfectly coiffed, wearing expensive athleisure and carrying a large Le Creuset dish. Eliza, darling, she breathed, enveloping me in a cloud of sharp floral perfume. It was a performance of sympathy. I came as soon as I heard, you poor thing. I brought my bechamel chicken casserole. You must not be eating. She pushed past me into the kitchen, setting the dish down on my quartz countertop as if claiming territory. She looked around, her eyes scanning everything, the art, the furniture, the German knife block. I cannot believe it, she said, turning to me, her face a mask of practiced concern. I told Marcus, you cannot just leave her, darling. It looks terrible. She was not angry he left. She was angry it looked bad. He is just so impulsive, she continued, helping herself to a glass of my wine. But Eliza, darling, you know how he is. A man like Marcus, a visionary. He needs inspiration. He needs air. Not management. There it was. The accusation, delivered as softly as a cashmere blanket. My accountant brain, as Marcus called it, was not inspiration. It was management. I had managed him. I had suffocated his vision. Beatrice, what do you want? I asked. I was too tired for this, too rich for this. The thought was new and sharp. Eliza. She feigned being wounded. I am here to help. I am here to mediate. This does not have to be a war. My family, we just want what is fair. We just want to make sure Marcus is not left. Well, destitute. She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs. Her eyes flickered to the signed lithograph above the fireplace. He put so much of himself into this place. She sighed. Mostly my money, I said. The words were out before I could stop them. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. That is not fair. Eliza, his ideas, his networking. That has value. You two built this together. He is entitled to his 50%. The lawyers will handle it. Beatrice, I said, picking up the divorce papers from the table. I needed them off the glass. I needed her out of my house. Of course. Lawyers, always so aggressive. She stood up, smoothing her yoga pants. May I just use your powder room before I face that dreadful traffic? Down the hall, I said automatically. She glided away, her perfume lingering. I stood in the living room, gripping the casserole dish. It was still warm. I had an overwhelming urge to throw it off the balcony. I heard the click of her phone's lock button from the hallway. I looked at the coffee table. Her phone. A brand new rose gold iPhone. She had left it. As I stared at it, the screen lit up. A notification. But I did not see the notification. I saw the app that was open in the background before the screen locked. The camera app. My blood ran cold. I did not touch the phone. I just knew. She was not using the powder room. She was in my study. She was in the guest room. Beatrice was not here to mediate. She was not here to deliver a sympathy casserole. She was here to take pictures. She was taking inventory of our art, our electronics, our expensive furniture. She was doing asset reconnaissance for her brother, cataloging the spoils of war before the first battle had even been declared. The vulture had landed, disguised as a dove. Beatrice's casserole went straight into the trash chute. The moment she was gone, I wiped down the counter where she had been. Her visit was a tactical error on their part. It galvanized me. My grief, my shock. It all calcified into cold, hard logic. I was a forensic accountant, but this was not my specialty. I dealt with corporate fraud, not domestic warfare. I needed a specialist. The next morning, I did not go to Veritas. I transferred $20,000 from my own premarital savings account, an account Marcus knew nothing about, into a new checking account. This was my retainer. I did not search for the nicest lawyer. I searched for the most expensive, most feared divorce attorney in Denver. The name was Julianne Croft. Her reputation was terrifying. She did not mediate. She annihilated. Her office was on the top floor of the newest glass and steel skyscraper in the financial district. The lobby was silent, all white marble and black leather. The view of the Rocky Mountains from her waiting room was not peaceful. It was a declaration of power. Her assistant led me into her office. Croft was a woman in her late 50s, dressed in a severe charcoal gray suit. She did not stand. She did not offer coffee. She just pointed to the chair. Ms. Vance, you have 90 minutes. My fee is $800 an hour. The clock is running. Talk. I did not cry. I did not get emotional. I presented my case as I would present a fraud report to Mr. Thorne. I laid out my salary versus Marcus's contributions. I detailed the $50,000 lost investment. I detailed his Atmosphere Solutions venture. I described Beatrice's reconnaissance mission. And then I handed her the divorce petition. He filed this on Tuesday, the 6th, I said. He called me a burden and left. Standard, she said, bored, scanning the paper. This is the non-standard part. I told her about the phone call from Wyoming. I told her about the death of my great-uncle Arthur. I told her the date of his death, and the date of Mr. Harding's call, Wednesday, the 7th. Croft stopped scanning. She looked up at me, truly seeing me for the first time. And the value of the estate, she asked, her voice dropping a fraction. Estimated at $3.2 million, physical gold, stamps, and securities. A slow, cold smile spread across Julianne Croft's face. It was the most frightening, beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Oh, Ms. Vance," she purred. "This is not a divorce. This is a gift." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. "This is clean, spotless. He filed before you were informed. That inheritance is not marital property. It is not community property. It is a fortress, Eliza. And he does not have the keys. He does not even know the fortress exists." She turned back, her eyes electric. "This is our strategy. It is simple. You are no longer an heiress. You are the poor, abandoned wife. He called you a burden perfect. We will be the heaviest burden he has ever known. We do not disclose the inheritance. We do not mention Wyoming. We let him think he is the one with all the leverage. We let him play his hand." "What is his hand?" I asked. "He wants 50-50, Croft said, back at her desk. "He thinks he is entitled to half the loft, half your savings, half your retirement. He thinks he is walking away with $500,000 or more to fund his next fantasy." "He will," I said, "if he gets his way." "He will not." Croft was already typing, her fingers flying. "We begin discovery. Immediately. We will drown him in paperwork. We will request every bank statement, every email, every text message related to his business dealings for the past 5 years. My own analytical mind kicked in. "Focus on atmosphere solutions," I said. "He is funding it somehow. My 50,000 is in there. I know it. But he needs more than that to be this confident." Croft nodded. "We will subpoena the articles of incorporation, the operating agreement, and all initial capitalization statements." She paused. "I can have a preliminary asset search run on him and the LLC this afternoon. It is expensive." "Do it," I said. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I had an ally. I had a weapon. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a secured email from Croft's office. The subject line was, "Initial finding." I opened the attached document. It was a public record search. Croft's investigator had been thorough. Marcus, my husband who had no job, my husband who called me a burden, had registered Atmosphere Solutions 3 weeks ago, and 2 days before he filed for divorce. The LLC had received a massive capital injection. It was not a bank loan. It was listed as an angel investment from another newly formed LLC with a meaningless name. The investment was for $250,000. That $250,000 investment became an obsession. It was a flaw in the data, a number that did not reconcile. My accountant's mind snagged on it and could not let go. It made no sense. If Marcus had secured a $250,000 angel investment, he was funded. He would not be desperate. He would not need my 50% of the loft. He would simply walk away, float on his new cloud of cash, and let the lawyers send me letters. But he was not doing that. Beatrice's visit, her inventory mission, was an act of desperation. They were greedy. Yes, but this felt like more. It felt like need. If he was desperate, if he did need my money, then who gave him $250,000, and why? That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my home office, the one Marcus never used. I opened my personal laptop. I had my own subscriptions, my own access to the databases and public record aggregators that Veritas used. This was off the clock. This was for me. I started with the mystery LLC, the angel investor. It had a generic, meaningless name. Apex Holdings Group. I ran a search. It was a shell company, formed only 1 month prior. Its registered agent was a cut-rate service in Delaware that specialized in anonymity. Its principal office was a post office box in Boulder. This was not an investor. This was a mask. I needed to find the money trail. I could not subpoena bank records, not personally, but I could trace the Uniform Commercial Code filings. A loan of that size, even a private one, often has a UCC-1 filing to secure the lender's interest against the LLC's assets. I ran the search on Atmosphere Solutions. There it was, a UCC-1 financing statement. Filed, public record. Debtor Atmosphere Solutions, LLC, secured party. The Beatrice Vance Family Trust. I stopped breathing. Beatrice, not just his sister, but his lender. It was not an investment. It was a loan. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, hard snap of a locking mechanism. Marcus had not found an angel. He had gone to his sister, to her husband's family trust, and he had begged. He had sold them on his vision, and they, in their infinite arrogance, had given him the money, but they had not given it freely. They had secured it. They had, in effect, placed a lien on his entire dream. He was not funded. He was leveraged. He was drowning in a brand new, massive debt to his own family. And I knew Beatrice's family. They would not be forgiving lenders. I saw the whole disgusting plan. He had secured the loan. He immediately filed for divorce, before the money was so commingled that I could lay claim to it. He would use the $250,000 to get the company off the ground, and he would use my half of our shared assets, the immediate sale of the loft, my investments to make the first crushing interest payments. He had not just left me. He had used me as collateral in his head. He was counting on liquidating me. The burden was not just an insult. It was his financial plan. I felt a cold, clean rage. I kept digging. This was not enough. My report was incomplete. I went back to the Atmosphere Solutions documents. I had the articles of incorporation. I knew Marcus was the founder, but who else? Who was he in business with? I read the filing. Managing member Marcus Vance. Managing partner Sienna Dubois. Sienna. I knew that name. She was the intern, a 23-year-old from Boulder he had hired 3 months ago. I had met her once at a disastrous company cocktail party. She was all teeth and ambition and wore clothes I knew she could not afford on an intern's salary. I had assumed, in a tired, cliched way, that he was sleeping with her. I had not cared enough to even be angry about it. It was just another of Marcus's predictable, pathetic impulses. But this was not a simple, sordid affair. He had put her name on the company. He had made her a partner. He had given this girl legal standing and ownership in a company that was financed by his sister's family money. He had not just replaced me in his bed. He had replaced me in his business. He had given her my seat at the table, the one I had paid for in 1,000 different ways over 15 years. I closed the laptop. The audit was complete. I saw every transaction, every betrayal, every liability, and I saw, with perfect forensic clarity, exactly where to place the knife. The case against Marcus was building. Julianne Croft was a master, burying him in discovery requests. But as she handled the tactical maneuvers, my mind kept returning to the locket, the small, silver key. It was a distraction, a puzzle that my brain preferred to the raw, ugly logic of the divorce. I kept it on my desk. It was too small for a door, too intricate for a padlock. It felt like a piece of a watch mechanism. I was examining it one night, turning it over under my desk lamp, when I saw it. I needed my reading glasses. Etched into the tiny metal shaft was a number, a 7-digit serial number. It was not a decorative key. It was an identifier. My blood chilled. I knew what this was. I had seen keys like this in the possessions of old money clients. This was a key to a safe deposit box, a non-standard, private one. I called Mr. Harding in Cheyenne the next morning. Mr. Harding, it is Eliza Vance. I believe the key is for a safe deposit box, an old one. Harding was silent for a moment. That would be just like him. He had one account at the First National Bank of Cheyenne, the oldest bank in the state. He closed it 20 years ago. But a private box. He could have maintained that. I will get a court order. This falls under the executor's purview. 2 days later, I was back in Cheyenne. The bank was a marble mausoleum, cold and silent. Harding had the court order. A nervous branch manager, who looked like he was barely 30, led us down into the vault. The air was dry and still. The manager used his key. Then I slid Arthur's tiny silver key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, oiled click. The box was small, only 3 inches high and 12 inches deep. I pulled it out. It was light. I was expecting gold coins, or perhaps diamonds. Inside, there was only one item, a black, leather-bound book. A simple ledger. Harding and I took it back to his office. I opened it. The pages were filled with a tiny, precise, obsessive script. It was my uncle's handwriting. But it was not a record of his own finances. It was an investigation. It was a timeline of dates, names, and transaction amounts. At the top of the first page, one name was written Joseph Vance, Marcus's father. I read, my hands starting to tremble. It started 30 years ago. It detailed the formation of a company, Vance Property Group. It listed investors, most of whom I did not recognize. It tracked wire transfers, the creation of offshore shell companies, and then the payments to the early investors paid. Arthur had noted, directly from the funds of new investors. It was a Ponzi scheme. A small, perfect, devastatingly effective one. Arthur, my paranoid, reclusive uncle, had been tracking Marcus's father for 3 decades. I turned the page. It was a new section, victims. I scanned the list of names, people who had lost their homes, their life savings. And then I saw his name, Edward Pendleton, my father, Arthur's brother. The breath left my body. The story my mother had told me was that my father was a poor businessman, that he had made a bad investment and lost everything. The stress, she said, was what killed him. The massive heart attack before he was 50. It was not a bad investment. It was fraud. Joseph Vance had personally solicited my father's investment. He had bankrupted him. He had destroyed my father's life, and in doing so, destroyed Arthur's brother. My uncle had not just sat in Wyoming, counting his gold. He had been watching. He had been hunting. He had spent 30 years of his life building a meticulous, undeniable case against the man who ruined our family. He had not just left me $3.2 million. He had left me a bomb. He had left me the truth. The first mediation was held in a neutral, beige-carpeted conference room in an office park in the suburbs. It smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. It was a place designed to suck the emotion out of a room. It did not work. Marcus was there, looking like a new man. He wore an expensive suit I had never seen, and a Swiss watch that must have cost $20,000. He was brimming with a smug, restless energy. He had his lawyer, a man who looked like he specialized in DUIs and was clearly out of his depth. I saw Sienna through the glass partition, waiting in the lobby, tapping her foot, checking her phone. She looked young and nervous. And then, to my surprise, Beatrice swept in. "I am here as family support," she announced to the mediator, a tired-looking man named Frank, "and as an interested party." "She is a creditor," Julianne Croft stated, her voice flat. She set her briefcase down. "Let the record show Ms. Beatrice Vance is a creditor to Mr. Vance's Personal LLC." Marcus's lawyer flinched. Marcus shot Beatrice a look of pure fury. She ignored him, taking a seat at the end of the table, the picture of aggrieved family nobility. The mediator, Frank, sighed. "Okay, let's begin. Mr. Vance, your counsel wanted to present an initial offer." Marcus's cheap lawyer stood, shuffled his papers, and cleared his throat. "Yes, my client has been deeply distressed by the breakdown of this marriage. He feels his contributions, his vision, have been devalued." I watched, saying nothing. Croft was perfectly still beside me, her hands folded. "Therefore," the lawyer continued, "we are demanding a 60-40 split of all marital assets, in my client's favor, to compensate for this emotional distress, and, to provide necessary funding for his startup, Atmosphere Solutions, which was, conceived during the marriage and is therefore a future marital asset. He pushed a paper across the table. This, of course, necessitates the immediate sale of the primary residence, the loft. Marcus sat back, crossing his arms, looking at me. He was waiting for me to break, to scream about how unfair it was. He was waiting for the Eliza he knew. She was not there. Croft and I just looked at the paper. We did not pick it up. "Thank you," Croft said, her voice smooth as ice. "That is an interesting position, especially given the state of your client's finances." Marcus's lawyer looked confused. "My client's finances are sound." "Are they?" Croft opened her file. It was a thick, pristine file. She pulled out a single document. "On August 12th, your client's LLC, Atmosphere Solutions, received a capitalization of $250,000. Is that correct?" Marcus's lawyer said, "Yes, a significant angel investment, proof of the company's value." "No," Croft said. She slid the UCC-1 filing across the table. "It was a loan from the Beatrice Vance Family Trust. A secured debt that your client failed to list on his sworn financial affidavit, which, as I am sure you know, is perjury." Marcus's lawyer's face went slack. He stared at the document. Marcus himself had gone from tan to a pale, sickly gray. Beatrice, at the end of the table, sat bolt upright. "That is a simple oversight," Marcus's lawyer stammered. A clerical error. "A $250,000 clerical error," Croft mused. "But that is not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is who he went into business with." She pulled out the next document, the LLC's Articles of Incorporation. "The operating agreement for Atmosphere Solutions lists 2 managing partners, Marcus Vance." She paused, her eyes lifting to meet Beatrice's. "And a Ms. Sienna Dubois." The room went completely, utterly silent. Sienna, the intern, the girl in the lobby. Beatrice's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open. She was looking at Marcus, but he was staring at the table, his knuckles white. Beatrice was the one who broke the silence. Her voice was not a whisper. It was a shriek that echoed off the cheap drywall. "You... what?" "Beatrice, now is not the time," Marcus hissed, his eyes darting to the mediator. "You gave her our money." Beatrice stood up, knocking her chair over. "You took my husband's family trust money and gave it to that child in the lobby." "It was a business decision," Marcus yelled back, half rising from his seat. "A business decision." Beatrice was vibrating with rage. She was not a support person. She was a creditor who had just seen her investment partners by law. "You put her name on the company. You gave that girl control of $250,000 of our money." It was beautiful. It was a controlled detonation. Marcus's lawyer was frantically trying to quiet them down. The mediator was saying, "Order, please order," but he was drowned out. Croft and I just sat there. She leaned over to me, her voice a bare whisper over the screaming. "And now," she said, "we wait." The room was pure chaos. Beatrice was screaming about fiduciary duty. Marcus was yelling that she was ruining everything. His lawyer was trying to physically put his hands on both of them, babbling about privileged communication, while the mediator just watched, his face a mask of resignation. He had clearly lost control. I let the noise swell, a wave of their own greed and stupidity crashing over them. I let it peak, let Beatrice's voice get shrill as she accused Marcus of incompetence. Then I spoke. My voice was not loud. It was quiet, and it cut through the screaming like a scalpel. "Here is my offer." They all stopped. All 4 of them, Marcus, Beatrice, the cheap lawyer, the mediator, turned to look at me. I had not spoken in an hour. "It is very simple," I said, my voice as calm as the steel in Julianne Croft's eyes. "I keep the loft. I keep my retirement, my savings, my accounts, all of it. And you, Marcus, you keep your debt. Marcus stared at me. The color was returning to his face in angry blotches. He burst into a short, ugly laugh. "Are you insane? The loft alone is worth $1.5 million. That is not 50-50. I am not an idiot, Eliza." "No," I said. "You are not, but you are desperate." "We will see you in court," his lawyer blustered, trying to regain his footing. "We will have that loft appraised and sold before—" I did not look at him. I looked at Croft. I gave her a small, precise nod. Croft, who had been sitting in perfect predatory silence, reached into her briefcase. She did not pull out a legal file. She did not pull out a financial statement. She pulled out a black, leather-bound ledger, my Uncle Arthur's ledger. She slid it across the polished table. It spun slowly and came to a stop directly in front of Marcus. He stared at it. "What is this?" "More of your accounting tricks." "My burden, Marcus," I said, my voice still quiet, "was my father. His name was Edward Pendleton." Marcus looked confused. "I do not care what his name was." "You should," I said, "because he was bankrupted by your father's vision, by Joseph Vance. He invested everything he had in your father's property group, and he lost it all. The stress killed him, just like you were trying to do to me. You are a precise echo of your father." Marcus and Beatrice froze. The blood drained from both their faces. This was not on any affidavit. This was not a financial filing. This was history. This was a ghost at the table. "That is slander," Beatrice whispered, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. "That was 30 years ago. It was all business losses. You cannot prove anything." "I can," I said. My Uncle Arthur was a very meticulous man. He was, like me, a burden, a numbers man. He tracked your father's Ponzi scheme for 3 decades. Every dollar in, every dollar out, every victim, including my father. Marcus's hand was shaking as he reached for the book. "I would not open it if I were you," Croft said, her voice a soft warning. "But the police will be fascinated, and the IRS, and the SEC. Beatrice was already grabbing her purse. "This is irrelevant. It is ancient history. It has nothing to do with this." "But that is where you are wrong." "Beatrice," I said. I stood up. I had the final piece of data. "You see, my uncle did not just track the past. He was tracking the present. You should really turn to the last page. The entry from 3 months ago." Beatrice stopped, her hand on her purse. "The illegal wire transfer," I continued, "for $100,000, from your father, Joseph Vance, from an undeclared offshore account. An account," Arthur noted, "that was funded by the original scheme. It was transferred directly into the Beatrice Vance Family Trust." I looked at her. I finally understood. "The very same trust," I said, letting the words land. "That just loaned Marcus $250,000. Your entire family, your entire fortune. It is all built on my father's stolen money." Beatrice looked like she was going to be sick. It was not just old fraud. It was active. It was current. And I had the ledger that connected the original sin to the new one. They were not just rich. They were criminals. And I, the forensic accountant, had the receipt. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the marble in Arthur's bank vault. Beatrice and Marcus were not just cornered. They were entombed. The ledger sat on the table like a headstone. Their family's reputation, their social standing, their carefully curated image of old money legitimacy, all of it was one phone call away from evaporating. Beatrice understood first. She was the one who managed the family image. She knew that public disgrace was worse than a financial loss. She knew that if that ledger became public, her father-in-law would go to prison, her husband's family trust would be seized, and she would be a social pariah. Marcus, on the other hand, was just broken. The bravado, the charisma, the vision, it all bled out of him, leaving a pale, hollow shell. He looked at me, his eyes finally clear of arrogance, filled only with a raw, dazed understanding. You did this, he whispered, his voice cracking. All of this, just for revenge. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a final audit, a closing of the books. I had not mentioned my inheritance. I had not needed to. My uncle's ghost was all the leverage I required. I stood up, Julianne Croft, who had been watching with the placid satisfaction of a spider whose web has just caught a fly, slid a new document across the table. It was not a proposal. It was a settlement agreement. My client has already signed, Croft announced to the room. I looked at the single, clean signature Eliza Vance. The terms are non-negotiable, I said. 100% of the marital assets, including the loft, all premarital investments, and my retirement accounts remain with me. Marcus assumes 100% of his business liabilities, including the $250,000 loan from the Beatrice Vance Family Trust. He waives all claims, current and future, to my estate. You sign, and the ledger goes back into its vault. You cannot do this, Marcus's lawyer stammered, but his voice had no conviction. Sign it, Marcus, Beatrice hissed, her voice low and venomous. She was already calculating the damage. This was the only way out. Sign the paper, now. She shoved the pen into his hand. Marcus, his hand trembling, his eyes still locked on me, put the pen to the paper. He signed his name. It was not the confident swirl I had seen on the divorce petition. It was the cramped, shaky signature of a defeated man. As he finished, he pushed the paper away and looked at me, his face twisting with one last, pathetic spike of malice. You will be broke and alone, he spat, his voice a low whisper. This loft, this big, empty life, you will never afford it. You will lose it all. You are still a burden. You are nothing without me. I picked up my briefcase. I picked up the ledger. I walked to the conference room door. I paused, my hand on the handle, and I looked back at him. That is the funny thing about burdens. Marcus, I said, my voice clear and bright. Some of us are worth more than you can possibly imagine. I gave him the one thing he had been waiting for, a smile. By the way, my Uncle Arthur the Black Sheep, I said. He left me $3.2 million. The loft is already paid for, in cash. His face, the confusion, the dawning, sickening comprehension, the finality. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I smiled. It was not a bitter smile. It was not angry. It was the smile of an account finally balanced, of a debt finally paid. It was the smile of freedom. I turned the handle and walked out, leaving him there with his sister, his debt, and the ashes of his family's stolen legacy. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to connect with you, so please comment below and let me know where you are listening from and share your thoughts. I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel and like this video. And if you really loved it, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by so many more people.